All rise. The courtroom stood as Judge Clarence Doyle strolled in, robes flowing, chin high. He didn't glance at the packed benches, the reporters scribbling away, or the cameras aimed squarely at the bench. His eyes locked only on the defendant being led through the side door in cuffs. Marcus Reed, 28, a black man in plain jeans and a scuffed hoodie. Doyle smirked before even sitting down. Case number 29874, State of Georgia versus Marcus Elijah Reed. Charges: assault on a law enforcement officer, resisting arrest, disturbing the peace, and obstruction of justice. Marcus stood silently beside his court-appointed lawyer, a man who hadn't spoken more than 4 words to him since they met that morning. Doyle scanned the docket casually. "Mr. Reed, how do you plead?" the judge asked, his voice almost mocking. "Not guilty," Marcus replied clearly. Doyle's brow rose. "Not guilty?" he repeated as if it were a punchline. There was a stifled chuckle somewhere in the gallery. "Your Honor," the defense lawyer said without looking up from his paperwork, "we waive reading of the charges and request a standard trial date." Doyle leaned forward. "You do realize, Mr. Reed, that there's body cam footage, multiple witnesses, and a hospital report showing Officer Kane suffered a fractured wrist during your not guilty altercation." "I was the one assaulted," Marcus said calmly. "The officer threw me against a wall for no reason." Doyle grinned, tilting his head like a game show host. "Is that right? And I suppose the officer just slipped and broke his wrist on your innocence." A few in the gallery laughed again. Marcus didn't. "My client has the right to a fair trial," the lawyer muttered. "And he'll get one," Doyle said, still smiling. "Trial date is set for April 3rd. Bail is denied. Defendant will remain in custody." Marcus opened his mouth, but the judge banged the gavel before he could speak. "Next case." As officers led Marcus back through the side door, he glanced around, hoping someone had seen what just happened, that the smirk on the judge's face wasn't lost in the fluorescent lighting, that maybe, just maybe, someone cared. Outside the courtroom, a reporter from the local paper leaned toward his colleague. "That judge has got a thing for theatrics. Or for humiliating black defendants," the other replied under her breath. Back in the holding cell, Marcus sat on the edge of a hard bench, fists clenched. His lawyer hadn't even explained the charges properly. No questions, no concern, just a shrug and a "we'll get through it." But Marcus knew better. Knew that the moment he got shoved face first into that police cruiser, the story had already been written. Black man attacks cop. Didn't matter that it was a traffic stop. Didn't matter that he asked why he was being searched. And it sure didn't matter that he never threw a punch. The scar above his eyebrow, fresh from where his head hit the pavement, told the real story. But no one wanted that one. Back in chambers, Judge Doyle was laughing with his clerk, sipping coffee from a mug that read, "Justice is served hot." "Another punk who thinks the system owes him something," he said, shaking his head. The clerk nodded, but her smile was tight. Tasha Miller, 26, had been working in that courthouse for 3 years. She had seen patterns. Faces change, but the script stayed the same. And something about today didn't sit right. She remembered seeing the body cam footage edited to pieces. No audio at the beginning. Just shaky images of Marcus already shouting. The rest conveniently missing. But she wasn't a lawyer. Just a clerk. And in that building, silence was survival. Still, she couldn't unsee the judge's smirk, or the way Marcus held his head up even as the system folded around him. That evening, in his cell, Marcus stared at the concrete wall, trying not to break. He thought about his mother, who told him to always speak respectfully to officers, to never argue, to keep both hands where they could see. He did everything right, but somehow he still ended up here with a broken public defender and a laughing judge. He didn't want pity. He wanted truth. He just didn't know that someone else in that courtroom had already begun to feel the same way. Absolutely. Here's section 2 of White Judge Laughs While Sentencing Black Man Until a Shocking Truth is Revealed in Court. This section covers the trial beginning, highlighting how the system is stacked against Marcus while keeping things realistic and engaging. The trial began on a rainy Monday morning. Courtroom 4B was full. Locals, reporters, even students from a nearby college observing the process as part of their criminal justice class. The cameras had been approved for limited coverage, but Judge Doyle made sure they were aimed just right, his bench lit, his face visible, his power undeniable. Marcus sat quietly beside the same detached public defender, Greg Winston, who now looked slightly more alert than during the arraignment, but only slightly. The jury box was nearly full now, and Marcus watched closely as names were called, faces introduced. Out of 14 selected, 12 were white, 1 Latino, 1 black woman. His lawyer raised no objections. Not one. Marcus leaned in. "You're not going to challenge the jury makeup?" Winston replied without eye contact. "Can't prove racial bias in selection." "Wouldn't hold." Marcus sat back, jaw tight. Opening statements began. The prosecutor, Karen Mills, was sharp, confident, and concise. The defendant, Marcus Reed, violently attacked a uniformed officer during a lawful stop. He resisted arrest, caused bodily harm, and endangered public safety. The evidence will show a clear case of aggression, unprovoked and unjustified. When Winston rose for his turn, he fumbled his papers. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a misunderstanding. My client, claims he was assaulted first. We ask that you keep an open mind. That was it. A 30-second opening. No passion. No fight. Marcus stared ahead, refusing to look at the jurors. He already knew what they were thinking. Day 2. The body cam footage was played. But it wasn't the full footage, just the last 2 minutes, edited down to show Marcus yelling, shoving the officer, and being tackled. No footage of the stop itself. No footage of Officer Kane grabbing him first. Just Marcus, angry and cornered. The screen went black. "Exhibit A," said Mills. "The clearest evidence we need." Marcus whispered to Winston, "That's not the whole video." Winston shrugged. "They gave us what they had. Move on." Then came Officer Kane's testimony. He walked to the stand in full uniform, hands still wrapped in a brace. "Mr. Reed was aggressive from the start," he said. "I pulled him over for running a red light. When I asked for his license, he started questioning me. I told him to step out of the vehicle and he became hostile. Started yelling. Shoved me when I tried to restrain him. Did you feel your life was in danger?" Mills asked. "Absolutely," Kane said without hesitation. Winston's cross-examination was weak. "Did you raise your voice?" "No." "Did you strike the defendant?" "No." "That's all," Winston said, already returning to his seat. Marcus stared at him in disbelief. The next witness was a local store owner who claimed to have seen the incident from across the street. She admitted it was raining, and she couldn't hear what was being said. Still, she testified, it looked like the officer was calm. The other guy was loud, swinging his arms. That's all it took. Another nail in the coffin. Marcus took the stand next. He sat straight, voice steady. "I didn't run any red light. He pulled me over in an alley. I asked why I was being stopped and he got angry, told me to step out, then slammed me into the wall without warning. I put my hands up, but he kept shouting. I thought I was going to die." Mills rose with a smirk. "So you're saying a decorated officer attacked you for no reason?" "I'm saying he didn't like me asking questions," Marcus replied. "Did you raise your voice?" "I asked what was happening." "Did you touch him?" "After he slammed me, I pushed his arm off me." "So, you admit to resisting?" "I was defending myself." Judge Doyle leaned forward. "Mr. Reed, this isn't a podcast. Just answer the questions." Marcus clenched his fists under the table. Later, outside the courtroom, the media buzzed. Some reporters asked if the trial was racially charged. Others weren't sure. But one observer, Tasha, the clerk, noticed something. The video file's timestamp. Something didn't add up. The footage began at 3:17 p.m., but the traffic stop was recorded on the ticket as starting at 3:02 p.m. 15 minutes were missing. She turned toward the evidence desk. No one seemed to notice, but she did. "Absolutely. Here's section 3 of White Judge Laughs While Sentencing Black Man. Until a shocking truth is revealed in court." This is where the cracks begin to show, and someone inside the courtroom dares to question what's going on. The courtroom was silent as the judge called for a recess. Jurors were ushered out. Lawyers gathered their papers. Marcus sat still, like a man stranded in a storm. The prosecution had painted him as violent, unstable, a threat. His own lawyer had done little to fight back. The body cam footage, though damning, had felt incomplete. Something was wrong, and Marcus could feel it in his bones. But he wasn't the only one. Tasha Miller, seated at the court clerk's desk, couldn't stop staring at the screen. Her eyes kept drifting to the timestamp on the footage. 3:17 p.m. She remembered the traffic ticket. She'd processed it the same day Marcus was arrested. The stop was logged at 3:02 p.m. 15 minutes. Gone. She bit the inside of her cheek, glancing toward the judge's bench. Doyle was speaking with the bailiff and chuckling at something on his phone. As usual, completely unconcerned. Tasha pulled out her phone and typed a quick note. Missing footage from 3:02 to 3:17. Bodycam edited? She hesitated before sending it to herself. A habit she'd developed over the past year when she started noticing how some cases always felt tilted. In the hallway, Tasha found Greg Winston, Marcus's public defender, leaning against the wall with a cup of coffee. "Mr. Winston," she said, lowering her voice. "I think there's missing footage in the bodycam file. The timestamp starts 15 minutes after the traffic stop was documented." Winston sipped his coffee and looked bored. "What are you talking about?" "The citation says the stop began at 3:02. The footage starts at 3:17. That's a big gap. Maybe the camera wasn't on yet. Maybe the officer forgot to activate it. Or maybe something was deleted." He rolled his eyes. "We're not going down that rabbit hole. It's just 15 minutes. 15 minutes could change the case." Winston stepped closer. "Listen, I appreciate your concern, but I have to work with the evidence I've been given. Let's not stir things up, all right?" Tasha didn't reply. She just stared at him until he turned away. That night, sitting at her kitchen table, Tasha couldn't sleep. She opened her laptop and pulled up the court's evidence archive, password protected, but accessible with her credentials. She opened Marcus's case folder. Just one bodycam file was uploaded. No raw footage. No metadata. No backups. She knew it wasn't standard. Usually, officers uploaded full files, uncut, straight from their bodycams. Why was this one different? She pulled up another folder, a random misdemeanor from 2 weeks ago. Same department. That bodycam file had raw footage attached, metadata, and an original timestamp. Everything intact. This wasn't normal. Her phone buzzed. A text from a friend. "You still working? Be careful, Tash." The next morning, Tasha did something risky. She made a private call from her car before work. Not to Winston. Not to the court. She called Amira Lewis. Amira was a civil rights attorney, young but fierce, known for taking on impossible cases and winning. Tasha had met her once at a law seminar and remembered her card. When Amira picked up, Tasha hesitated. "I think there's something wrong with a case in Judge Doyle's courtroom. A black defendant named Marcus Reed. I can't say much, but the footage doesn't add up. And the court isn't doing anything." There was silence. Then Amira said calmly, "I'm listening." Later that afternoon, Amira showed up outside the courthouse, sunglasses on, documents in hand. She didn't walk in as part of the trial yet, but she watched from the back row as the prosecution rested its case. Then she approached Winston during a break. "I want in on this case," she said. Winston frowned. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who actually cares whether your client rots in prison for something he didn't do. You're not on the defense team." "Not yet, but your client can authorize it." Winston snorted. "You don't even know the case." Amira smiled coldly. "I know the body cam was tampered with. And I know the court records have been scrubbed of the original footage. That's enough." In the holding cell, Amira met Marcus for the first time. He looked tired, worn down, but his eyes sharpened when she introduced herself. "Why are you here?" he asked. "Because someone believes you." She laid out everything, Tasha's discovery, the missing time, the altered file. Marcus sat back. "So I'm not crazy." "No, you're not. And I'm not leaving until we get the truth into that courtroom." Certainly, here's section 4 of White Judge Laughs While Sentencing Black Man Until a Shocking Truth is Revealed in Court. This section ramps up the tension as Amira pushes for full transparency and begins to turn the tide. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. News of the body cam footage controversy had already spread like wildfire. The media crowd in the back was larger than usual, cameras clicking nonstop. Even the court stenographer, usually buried in her notes, seemed more alert. Judge Doyle, as always, strode in with the same air of indifference, adjusting his glasses before taking his seat. He banged the gavel, calling the room to order. "Mr. Winston, does the defense have any more witnesses?" he asked, his tone still dismissive. Winston stood. Your Honor, no more witnesses at this time." Amira stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. Your Honor, the defense requests a continuation of the proceedings. Doyle raised an eyebrow. A continuation? We're already a week into this trial. What more do you need? I'm requesting full access to the unedited body cam footage, Your Honor, from Officer Kane's camera from the beginning of the stop. The room fell silent. Marcus's lawyer looked confused, but he didn't object. Doyle narrowed his eyes. We've already reviewed the footage. It's clear enough for anyone with half a brain to see what happened. Amira stood her ground. With all due respect, Your Honor, it's not clear. We've been provided with edited footage cut down to only a fraction of the stop. The timestamp discrepancies raise serious concerns. If the court intends to present this as evidence, I request the unedited file. Otherwise, we may have to consider the possibility that evidence is being withheld or tampered with. Doyle's face hardened. The room went tense, every eye on the judge. The clock on the wall ticked louder. Objection! Mills shouted, standing abruptly. This is a blatant stall tactic. There is no reason to go back and revisit this minor detail. Amira's eyes didn't leave the judge. I'm not stalling. I'm ensuring that the defendant receives a fair trial. We can't allow evidence to be presented selectively. Doyle leaned forward. Are you accusing my court of? I'm not accusing anyone, Your Honor. I'm just asking for the truth. A long silence followed. The tension in the room was palpable. Doyle cleared his throat. Fine, he said, voice low. The defense is entitled to review the full footage. But I won't tolerate delays. Later that afternoon, the courthouse was humming with the excitement of an unexpected development. Amira had secured a legal order forcing the prosecution to release the full body cam footage. The media had caught wind of it, and the courtroom, once just a mundane daily business, was now packed with reporters. Winston reluctantly passed the new footage to Amira. He didn't understand why she had insisted on it. He didn't see what difference 15 minutes could make. Amira sat with Tasha in the small viewing room. They loaded the full body cam file onto the screen. Winston reluctantly passed the new footage to Amira. He didn't understand why she had insisted on it. He didn't see what difference 15 minutes could make. Amira sat with Tasha in the small viewing room. They loaded the full body cam file onto the screen. The timestamp was different this time. No gaps. The camera came to life at 3:02 p.m. just as the traffic stop began. The footage was grainy but clear enough to make out the interaction. Officer Kane could be seen pulling over Marcus's car. He approached the driver's side door and immediately started shouting at Marcus, demanding that he step out of the vehicle. Amira's finger hovered over the fast-forward button. Watch closely, she said to Tasha. They both leaned in as the next few moments unfolded. Kane was visibly agitated, his words barely audible over the noise of the street. Marcus, on the other hand, had his hands raised in the air, clearly trying to comply. The footage cut off right as Kane reached in, grabbing Marcus by the arm and yanking him out of the car. But then something unexpected happened. As the camera shook from the struggle, the next few moments were different. Officer Kane appeared to shove Marcus violently against the side of the car. His hands came up Marcus's hands, not in a defensive stance, but in an attempt to protect himself from the force of the officer's push. The bodycam footage that had been shown in court didn't show this. It didn't show the officer's initial aggression. It didn't show the rough treatment Marcus had endured before things escalated. Tasha gasped. This changes everything. Amira didn't say a word. She knew what she had to do. The next day in court, Amira wasted no time. She called for a motion for dismissal, citing the newly discovered footage and the intentional omission of critical evidence. Judge Doyle looked almost bored as Amira spoke. But when she presented the footage, everything changed. The courtroom was silent as the full, unedited footage played on the screen. The jurors watched as Officer Kane shoved Marcus. The audience murmured in shock as the events unfolded, showing the officer's unprovoked aggression and the extent of Marcus's restraint. Amira didn't give the judge a moment to speak. She turned toward the jury, locking eyes with each of them. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she began, her voice steady. This is the truth. This is the reality of what happened. The footage was intentionally withheld. Officer Kane assaulted my client. And now you have seen it with your own eyes. Judge Doyle slammed his gavel. Enough, Ms. Lewis. You've made your point. But the damage was done. The room was buzzing with disbelief and the jury exchanged nervous glances. Even Mills, the prosecutor, had no immediate response. The evidence was undeniable. The rest of the trial was a blur. The prosecution scrambled to recover, but the truth was now out. There was no turning back. Marcus sat in his chair. He wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or angry. But one thing was certain. The system had just been exposed for what it was. The court was tense the next morning. The silence in the room was thick as the jury filed back in, their faces unreadable. Marcus sat stiffly beside Amira, his thoughts a swirl of confusion and anticipation. Yesterday's bombshell, the footage that had been hidden, the truth that had broken wide open, was still reverberating. But there was no guarantee the system would fold just because the evidence was clear. Judge Doyle entered, his usual smugness gone. For the first time, there was a hint of unease in his expression. He seated himself slowly, eyeing Amira across the courtroom. She could tell he wasn't used to being challenged like this. "Proceed, Ms. Lewis," Doyle said, though there was no bite in his words. Amira stood, the motion for dismissal still hanging in the air. "Your Honor, I believe the evidence presented, coupled with the clear misconduct in Officer Kane's actions, warrants immediate dismissal of all charges against my client. The prosecution has failed to establish a credible case." Mills, who had been silent since the footage was shown, jumped up. "Your Honor, the footage is Exhibit A." Amira cut her off. "Is clear. The prosecution cannot argue it. Officer Kane initiated the violence, and Marcus Reed was simply attempting to protect himself." Mills hesitated, clearly recalculating. "This is a minor discrepancy. It doesn't change the core of the charges." "It changes everything," Amira fired back. "The core of this case is based on a lie, an omission of critical evidence. You cannot ignore that." The tension between the two women was palpable. For a moment, it felt like a war was being waged in the air, not just with words. Doyle rubbed his eyes, clearly feeling the weight of the situation. "Ms. Mills, do you have anything to add?" The prosecutor hesitated but then stood tall. "We have other evidence. The witness testimony, the officer's injuries." But Amira wasn't done. "The witness testimony was based on faulty observation. The officer's injuries came from his own aggression. We can't just ignore the facts because it's convenient to do so." The judge turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, please disregard the dismissal motion. The court will proceed with closing arguments tomorrow." The jury exchanged uneasy looks. It was clear the defense had shaken their confidence. They weren't looking at this case the same way anymore. After the session, Marcus stood, breathing deeply as the tension in his shoulders slowly eased. Amira placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "You've got this. The truth is out there now. They can't bury it." Marcus nodded, but there was a storm of thoughts in his mind. He had expected a fight, but not like this. He thought back to the moments before his arrest, the fear, the confusion, the disbelief when Kane had first attacked him. It felt like a different world now that it was all laid bare, but a question lingered in the back of his mind. What now? The days that followed were filled with legal maneuvering, but there was no hiding from the truth anymore. The momentum had shifted. The prosecution tried to regroup, but their case was unraveling. And even Judge Doyle, who had always been so confident in his rulings, couldn't ignore the cracks that were now showing. On the eve of closing arguments, Amira met with Marcus in the courthouse's small meeting room. "Tomorrow is your day," she said, looking him in the eye. "Tomorrow we end this." Marcus didn't say much. He couldn't. But the weight that had been on his shoulders for so long had lightened just a little. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe that he might actually walk out of that courtroom a free man. The next morning, when the trial resumed, Amira was ready. And as the closing arguments began, the prosecution had nothing left to say. Here's Section 6 of White Judge Laughs While Sentencing Black Man Until a Shocking Truth is Revealed in Court. This section delves into the culmination of the trial where the jury finally delivers their verdict and the weight of the truth hits home. The courtroom was quieter than it had ever been. For the first time in this trial, even the journalists at the back of the room were quiet, sensing the gravity of what was happening. The closing arguments had been made. Amira had delivered her final statement with precision and confidence, laying out the entire case and dismantling every weak point in the prosecution's argument. She had shown them exactly how Officer Kane's actions led to this moment, how the video footage had been manipulated, and how Marcus had been unjustly accused. Now all that was left was the waiting. Marcus sat with his hands clasped tightly together in front of him. His heart pounded as he watched the jury leave the room to deliberate. He could feel the eyes of the courtroom on him, the weight of all their opinions pressing down, but for once it didn't seem to matter. Tasha, sitting near the back of the defense table, exchanged a look with Amira. She could see the resolve in Amira's eyes. "It's done," Tasha whispered, barely audible. But Amira only nodded, not yet willing to entertain the thought that it was over. The deliberation room was tense. The jury had been in there for 2 hours, far longer than anyone had anticipated. The foreman, a middle-aged man with gray hair and a stoic expression, had barely spoken since the trial had begun. But today he was the one who was speaking the most. "I'm telling you," he said, "that footage is a game-changer. We've all seen it. The officer's actions were unprovoked. But the officer was injured," another juror argued. "Doesn't that count for something?" "No," the foreman replied firmly. "It's not enough to justify what he did." Marcus Reed was trying to protect himself. "It's all right there on the tape." One of the younger jurors spoke up. "But don't we have to consider the officer's perspective?" He said he felt threatened. Another juror, an older woman who had remained silent until now, looked up sharply. "The officer is the one who escalated the situation. He wasn't trying to de-escalate, he wasn't trying to talk things through. He threw the first punch and he didn't even give Reed a chance. He wasn't protecting anyone, he was bullying him." The foreman sighed. "That's what I'm saying. This isn't about who was hurt or who wasn't. It's about justice. And there's no justice in convicting a man when the truth is right there in front of us." The jury fell silent again, the weight of their decision settling in. They knew that if they acquitted Marcus, they would be challenging not just the case, but the whole system that had allowed this to happen. But they also knew that if they didn't acquit him, they would be complicit in a miscarriage of justice. Back in the courtroom, Judge Doyle took his seat again, his eyes scanning the room as the jury returned. The entire room held its breath. The foreman stood and addressed the court. "Your Honor, we have reached a verdict." Doyle nodded. "Please read it aloud." The foreman cleared his throat. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Marcus Reed, not guilty of all charges." The room exploded into a flurry of whispers and gasps. Amira's eyes widened with disbelief, and Tasha, who had been holding her breath, finally let it out. Marcus sat frozen, blinking as if he couldn't quite process what had just happened. But then he felt it, the weight lifting from his chest. He looked at Amira, who was already standing beside him, her face lighting up with a quiet victory. Judge Doyle's gavel struck the desk sharply. "The court is adjourned," he said curtly, though his tone seemed less certain than before. Marcus stood, numb for a moment, before Amira guided him toward the door. He could hear the murmurs in the courtroom, the reporters, the onlookers who had witnessed the trial, gathering their things, snapping photos. The buzz of victory mixed with the hum of disbelief. Outside the courtroom, Tasha was the first to approach them. She wrapped Marcus in a tight hug. "You did it," she whispered. Marcus didn't know what to say. He just stood there, staring at the floor, letting it all wash over him. He had won. But it wasn't just his victory, it was a victory for everyone who had ever been wronged by the system, for everyone who had been forced to fight for their own truth. As they left the courthouse, Amira looked at Marcus. "You're free. And now we make sure the people who tried to silence you are held accountable." Marcus nodded. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he could breathe again. The fallout from the trial was swift. Officer Kane was placed under internal investigation for his actions, and his record came under scrutiny. The district attorney's office faced public backlash for their role in pushing a flawed case forward. And as for Judge Doyle, he was not re-elected the following year. But Marcus's life had irrevocably changed. The case had left scars, deep ones, that no verdict could heal. But it also sparked a wider conversation about police misconduct, accountability, and the biases that ran deep within the justice system. As for Amira, her reputation as a lawyer who fought for the truth and won only grew. And Marcus, though free, knew that the fight for justice didn't end with his case. He was just getting started. As Marcus stepped out of the courthouse, the bright sunlight hit him like a new beginning. He squinted, breathing in deeply, as though he hadn't taken a proper breath in months. His world had been turned upside down, but now, standing here, in this moment, everything felt possible again. Amira stood next to him, a quiet victory in her eyes. "It's over," she said softly. "But it's not the end. This was just the start of something bigger." Marcus nodded, the weight of those words sinking in. For the first time, he wasn't just thinking about his own survival. He was thinking about the countless others who'd been wronged by the system, who never had the opportunity to speak out, never had someone in their corner fighting with everything they had. "Where do we go from here?" Marcus asked, the question lingering in the air. "Wherever you want to," Amira replied. "This victory is yours, Marcus. And the fight doesn't end here. We keep pushing, we keep speaking up. The truth doesn't stop." As they walked through the crowd of reporters, Marcus felt the eyes of the world on him, some in awe, others in disbelief. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't afraid anymore. If you believe in truth, justice, and storytelling that sparks conversation, don't just watch, be part of the change. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss powerful stories like this one.